Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, as well as the October month-long Pumpkin Playground Festival featuring hay rides and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188.
Welcome to Gardening with Burke Nursery, the show where we help you grow your garden and increase the curb appeal of your yard. I'm your host, Misty Kacheris, the horticulturalist at Burke Nursery and Garden Center. Often, we think about having a garden where we can look outside our window and enjoy all that nature has to offer. But sometimes we either work or live in locations that can't afford us the pleasure of seeing outside a window. So this is where we can find ways to create a garden for the indoors. And today, I'm going to show you just how to create one of those indoor gardens called Terrarium Gardens. One of the things to think of when you're creating a terrarium garden is what type of terrarium would you like to have? And that's based on two different things. One here, this is a terrarium that is actually a cookie jar, and it's what we call a closed terrarium. So as you can see, it has a cover. Another type of terrarium would be this bowl, and this bowl is what we call an open terrarium, so that it has no cover at all. Then you have what I call the semi-open ones. For example, this jar has a hole in the side, and it has a hole in the top when the cork's not in here, but it also can be fairly self-contained in a semi-closed environment. And then finally, you have this terrarium here, which is, well, we have two terrariums here, which are actually hanging terrariums. So you have this one little hanging terrarium where you can have a small plant in here. And then this is also a hanging terrarium where you can have more of a modern look. But you may also ask, okay, if I have these terrariums, well, how do I decide on what kind of plants do I want? And that's the next thing that you look at. So what I have here in front of me is I have several plants. And right in front of me, I have plants that are what we call tropical plants. And the tropical plants means that they need moisture, they need humidity, they like to be in a terrarium where there's some sort of containment, whether it's one of these hanging terrariums or perhaps a jar terrarium, or even what I call the cookie jar terrarium. And then the other plants that we have here are what I call the succulents. And succulents are plants that prefer not to have a lot of water. They prefer to have a lot of dryness. And they actually prefer to be in a terrarium that is an open-ended terrarium, or an open-top terrarium like this terrarium. Why? Because they like the dryness. Where if you put the tropical plants in a closed terrarium, you have the humidity and you have the ecosystem and the environment where you have moisture coming to your plants all the time. So, all right, now we have the basics. You have your plants, you have the terrariums. So what else do you need? Well, the one thing that you definitely need, and you always need this, is horticultural charcoal. And this is critical. Horticultural charcoal enables you to purify the water. It enables the water to evaporate properly within your terrarium setting, and it just creates a more stable environment. The other thing that you need is you need river rock or drainage rock. Now, not all terrariums will need the drainage rock or the river rock. For example, when I'm working with a small terrarium like this one, then it's pretty hard to put in rock and put in horticultural charcoal and then still put in enough soil for the plant to be able to grow in there. And of course, speaking of soil, this is where the potting mix or the potting soil depends on the type of plant that you have. So if I'm going to use the tropical plants, then I would use the regular potting mix. If I'm going to use succulents or even cacti, then I would use the cactus mix or succulent and cactus mix. So you want to make sure you have the right soil. In addition, and some of these tools may seem a little strange to you, but a very important tool to have is a baster. And the reason is when you're dealing with a small terrarium and you want to water it, it's actually easier to water it with a baster than it is with a watering tray. The other is that you may need a funnel. Or if you don't have a funnel, you can just go to your regular store and take a look at your baking goods, and you can get one of these baking bags for icing, and it'll work as a funnel. And I'll show you why you need the funnel a little later. And then, of course, we have these little tools, which are also a must. And so this is a little rake. This is a little brush. So if you get any dirt on your leaves, you can brush them off. Depending on the type of terrarium, you may need the tongs. And then what you may also want to consider is you may want to consider adding a little whimsy to your terrarium garden. And a little whimsy means maybe putting in some colored sand. So for example, this is blue decor sand. This is black decor, this is the black decor sand. Or you may even want to consider using white decor sand. And then of course, finally, when I like to add a little whimsy, what I like to do is I like to go to, again, the cake decorating place in the store and find little things that could be fun to create a little whimsy in your garden. So here I have some little ducks. Here I found some little seashells. Or if I were doing this for a friend of mine who has a son, I might consider a terrarium garden that is basically a road trip, and just found these little cars that I would put right into the terrarium. And as you're thinking about themes, you may even want to have a little pathway and create a little pathway garden. I found these little pieces of wood, again, in the cake decorating section. And so if you want, you can put them into your garden. And that's the nice thing about creating terrarium gardens. Not only can you decide on whether I want a tropical garden, but you can decide on, do I want a garden that has a special theme? And at a recent class that I taught on terrarium gardens, a person who loves her dog, actually she showed me a picture of her themed puppy terrarium garden. So whatever it is that you're interested in creating, what I'd like to do now is bring you into my world of creating a terrarium garden and show you just exactly how to take all these steps and these tools that I talked about and have your terrarium garden. So what I'd like to do now is I would like to show you how to create your own terrarium garden. And this terrarium garden will be what I call a tropical garden. Now here I have a creeping ficus plant, and you'll notice these plants are very tiny. They're just about 1.5-inch pots. This one is a arrowhead plant. This one is a really cutie. This is a miniature Venus flytrap. And here's the actual flower stalk on the Venus flytrap. And then also here is another arrowhead plant. And then this is known as a club moss. What's fascinating about the club moss, I recommend using the club moss in large terrariums because, believe it or not, this small little plant that is in a 4-inch pot can actually grow 4 feet wide. So let's start. The first step is your gravel. And what you want to do is that you want to put the gravel very gently into your terrarium. Now, this gravel is here to help provide drainage, and it's also here to help provide a nice physical appearance as well. And then the next that you want to put in is your horticultural charcoal. And again, that horticultural charcoal, a couple things about horticultural charcoal. First of all, be very careful when you're putting in horticultural charcoal. The reason is because it's charcoal, it's very, very dusty. So you don't want to have your face near it as you're putting it in. And it's not quite like regular charcoal that you would see, but it is actually small little chips as opposed to ground up charcoal. And so that helps with the drainage, and horticultural charcoal also helps with the filtration system of the water. And what happens is that when you're watering your garden, it will actually act as a wick. And then because we're doing a tropical garden, then we're using regular potting mix. And this is where having the little tools help, because you can just kind of use them to move the soil around. The next thing that I want to do is I want to decide with this terrarium, is this a terrarium that I want as a centerpiece? And if it's a terrarium that I want as a centerpiece, then perhaps I would want my little plants being in the center, coming out from around the edges. Or am I planning on putting this in perhaps a corner? And if that's the case, then perhaps I may want to put my plants in the terrarium towards the edge. So in this case, this is what I call a little bit of a centerpiece. So what that means is that I will take my plants, and because the plants are so small, they just kind of fall apart root-wise, and just put them in like this. And then I turn it around and I'll look at it sideways to see if I like the way it looks. And I do. So I will now put in another plant. And this plant has a stronger root system, so that I will just put that in there. And now, this is where I want to take add a little whimsy. I want to create a little path. And so I'm going to take, actually, I've decided, I said a little whimsy, but I want this to be almost a little seashore. So instead of the wood, I am going to take some of these and these are shells, just little bits of shells. And I'm going to take my little duck, just kind of put it there. And so the little duck is now just looking outside the window. And then, all right, so you don't always have a seashore with a Venus flytrap, but that's all right. It'll still look pretty nice here. So I am going to put a Venus flytrap towards the edge here. Just kind of spritz it out. And then just put the Venus flytrap in there. And I didn't bring any scissors with me, but what I would do is I would cut back a couple of these leaves, since this is going to be an enclosed terrarium. And then the other thing, because this is a seashore, what I want to do, and this is where your funnel comes in handy. So I put the funnel here. And as you can see, I'm now creating a layer of sand right around my little terrarium here. But I'm able to put that sand where I want it to be because I have the funnel. And then just add a couple more little, and here you have it. This is a tropical terrarium. Well, now what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you how to create a succulent garden. And I was toying between this open dish, which I had mentioned before, but then I decided, no, this would be really nice. It has enough of an opening to create the dryness that the succulents need, and it's a little bit of a hanging terrarium, and that would look nice on a windowsill if I wanted to hang it from the windowsill, or it could look nice on a table where I don't have a lot of room to hang something, to put down something like this. The first thing too is we're going to do something a little different. As you can tell, there's not quite as much room with this particular terrarium, meaning at the base. So in this case, we're only going to use the horticultural charcoal. We're not going to use the gravel. And because horticultural charcoal can be very dusty, it helps if you could just put the entire bag into here, and that way you don't have to worry about getting the dust back into your face. And as you can see, there's not a lot of horticultural charcoal in here. The other is that because this is a cactus, a succulent, I'm using the cactus mix, which is for cactus and also succulent plants. And I'm going to do something a little different here. So just add some soil, some potting mix in here. Now, as you can tell, here's the opening. So I am going to put a lot more of this potting mix towards the back than I am towards the front. And the succulents that I decided to use is a Semperverium calinda, which is what this is right here, a little floret. Oftentimes your hens and chicks. This, believe it or not, is an aloe plant. And I just thought that would be very cute. And this is a plant from Africa. It is called ox tongue. And if you look at the plant closely, you'll see that the little succulent leaves look like little tongues sticking out at you. Even though it's related to the aloe family, it does not have the same properties that the aloe plants have when it comes to healing burns, so don't try to use this for that. Instead, just there's a theory that amongst the shamans in Africa that the plant was used so that you could hide from other people if you didn't want them to find you anywhere. So I'll just use this bowl. Now, if you'll notice, this is rather very long-rooted. So I'm taking some of those roots and I'm actually moving the plant into just half its root size. And then I will just put it into the terrarium like this. And then because I want it to be above, I am going to add more soil to the base. Just to keep it in place. And now, the question of which side would I like to have this ox tongue and which side would I like to have the aloe. And I've decided that I like the ox tongue on the right side. And the other nice thing about terrariums, especially succulents, you can plant succulents very, very, very close together. They're happy very close together. And then the other is the aloe. And see, again, because it's such a small little pot, the soil is falling out from around the pot. Just put that right in there. Now, what you'll notice is that it's difficult for me to get the soil back there, and I don't have a large enough funnel here, but this is where you start just doing the best you can to get the soil in that spot that it wouldn't be, that it couldn't go. And then remember when I said that we need our brush? And the brush is very important because look at all this poor little soil has gotten on my aloe plant. That's not a good thing in the long run. It's okay during this transformation process of planting it, but just brush that up. And here I have, just clean it up a little more. And here I have a succulent terrarium. Isn't it pretty? Terrarium gardens are a great way to have your own private garden, whether it's in your home or office. It's a fun activity that you can do with your children as well. If you have any questions about terrarium gardens or any gardening questions, please feel free to contact me at misty@burkenursery.com. I hope that you enjoyed learning about terrariums and how to plant them. I'm your host, Misty Kacharis, and I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me here at Gardening with Burke Nursery. I'm looking forward to helping you grow your garden.
Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, as well as the October month-long Pumpkin Playground Festival featuring hayrides and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188.